ഇന്ന് ഫുള്ള് കടത്തായിരുന്നു.
ആണോ? പിന്നെ എങ്ങനെ ഇപ്പൊ ക്ലാസ് ഇരിക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്നേ നന്ദന? തലവേദന എടുക്കില്ലേ?
കുറച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞ് നോക്കും.
Friends, welcome to the lecture series on political ideology. Today, we are about to discuss a new topic. The title of this topic is Green Politics, or otherwise we can say ecologism. Friends, it was on 27 September 1962. Rachel Carson published the book Silent Spring. And he documented in this book the adverse effects on the environment because of the indiscriminate use of pesticides. This was a landmark book in the sense that it gave birth to what may be called an environmental movement and a new understanding that man's passion for industrialization, man's passion for consumer culture, man's disregard for the nature and environment will have to pay a big price. It was in the mid 1940s. Rachel Carson became concerned about the use of synthetic pesticides. The US Department of Agriculture launched in 1957 Fire Ant Eradication Program. It involved aerial spraying of DDT and other pesticides mixed with fuel oil. So this program included spraying of private land, which prompted Rachel Carson to devote her research on the effect of pesticides on environmental poisoning. The impetus for writing Silent Spring was a letter that she received in January 1958 by Carson's friend, Olga Owens Huckins. Olga Owens Huckins sent a letter to the Boston Herald. A copy of the same letter was also sent to Rachel Carson. That was in the month of January 1958. The letter described the death of birds around her property. And she doubted the death of birds which were abundantly roaming around in her property nearby her home. But now such birds are not seen there. And Olga Owens was concerned why birds are not coming to my property. And she found that the aerial spraying of DDT to kill mosquitoes was the reason why the birds are, dead. And friends, this letter by Olga Owens prompted Rachel Carson to write the book, famous book, Silent Spring, in the year 1962. The overriding theme of Silent Spring was the negative effects of human life on the natural world. And Carson's main argument was that pesticides had a detrimental effects on the environment. And she said it's biocides, the spraying of pesticides on the environment, for which she coined a word called biocides. And the book was translated into many other languages, and it was an international best-selling book, and the book had an international impact. And Carson's book colored a global environmental movement, and it has become the rallying point of a new type of social movement in the 1960s. And later, in the year 1968, Paul Ehrlich published a best-selling book titled The Population Bomb. That was in the year 1968. And Garrett Hardin in 1968 published The Tragedy of the Commons. And in 1972, Donella H. Meadows published a famous book, The Limits to Growth. And in 1972 again, Edward Goldsmith published a famous book, Blueprint for Survival. And later, books like Animal Liberation 1975, Peter Singer's book, The Case for Animal Rights, These kinds of books were published. And friends, by 1960s and in 1970s, we can see ecologism became a political agenda. Ecologism became a political philosophy in the 1960s, particularly because of the publication of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. And first, the term ecology was coined by German zoologist Ernst Haeckel in the year 1866. The word ecology was derived from the Greek word oikos. In Greek, the word oikos means habitat. But ecology became a political ideology in the 1960s. In the 1960s. And ecologism is the idea that nature is an interconnected whole, which involves both humans and non-humans, as well as the inanimated world. And many people suggest that the principles of ecologism, or otherwise called green politics, ecologism or otherwise called green politics, is derived from ancient pagan religions, such as the idea of Mother Earth. In pagan religions, planet Earth is considered as mother, not father. Planet Earth in pagan religion is considered as mother, Earth mother. As well as from Eastern religion, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. These religions believe the interconnection of the whole thing in the world. Green politics, or otherwise called ecologism, is an idea that we have to return to the nature. Humans have to return to nature because we are already detached from nature. So green politics is comprised of, or is formed out of, a combination of political ideas. There are distinct arguments in green politics, which became a political philosophy in the 1960s. And in this lecture, we will come across ecologism as a political ideology, and we will talk some important principles of ecologism for your understanding. And I will be talking 5 important points of ecologism or green politics. They are: first point, ecology. Second, holism, HOLISM, holism. Third, sustainability. Fourth, environmental ethics. And 5, from having to being, from having, HAVING, to being, BEING. That's a philosophy. And friends, let us move on to the first point, ecology. So green politics is based on a view of ecology. Friends, the central pillar of, or central principle of green thought is ecology. Ecology is the idea that all ecosystems tend towards a state of harmony or equilibrium. And biologists refer to this situation as homeostasis. 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 Homeostasis means the tendency of a system particularly the physiological system of higher animals to maintain internal equilibrium. That means food and other resources in the nature are recycled. And the population size of animals, insects, and plants adjust naturally to the available food supply. And it is believed that you are not supposed to disturb the situation, the homeostasis in the nature. If you disturb it, we cannot survive. So ecologism therefore provides a radically different vision of nature. Ecologism favors ecocentrism. Ecocentrism. And challenges anthropocentrism. Go to Google and find out the explanations to the words ecocentrism and anthropocentrism. Anthropocentrism is the idea that human needs are more important than the needs of other animal species or plant species in the nature. Therefore, humans have a moral superiority to exploit the natural resources. Then what is ecocentrism? The quite opposite of anthropocentrism. That is, humans are just a part of the nature, not superior. And in ecocentrism, there are two versions: the shallow ecology and deep ecology. Some people are shallow ecologists and some people are deep ecologists. The word shallow ecology and deep ecology are coined by Arne Naess, Arne-Naess, Arne Naess, who coined the words shallow ecology and deep ecology. Shallow ecology means it's a green ideology or a green ideological perspective that harness lessons of ecology, you have to draw lessons of ecology to the needs of humans, but also you have to sustain resources and conserve resources. So it's a mild view of ecology. A mild view of ecology. Man is also important, as well as other resources in the nature are also important. But the natural resources in the nature should be utilized for man's need in a way that the resources in the nature should be sustainable, as well as it should be conserved. Shallow ecology. But when it comes to deep ecology, it's an extreme view. Some people are extreme, ecologist, called a deep ecologist. Shallow ecologist is a humanist perspective of nature, or a light or enlightened anthropocentrism. Shallow ecology is an enlightened anthropocentrism, that we have to use resources in the nature. Why? Because we are human beings, but you are not supposed to misuse the resources. If we misuse the resources, we cannot survive in the world. That is called shallow ecology. That you have to think about non-renewable resources. You have to reduce pollution. These kinds of ideas constitute shallow ecology. Whereas deep ecology is extreme view. And this type of people argue that shallow ecology is a weak ecology. There is no point in making arguments in favor of shallow ecology. You have to think something very radical. Therefore, deep ecology is an ideological, green ideological perspective that rejects anthropocentrism. And deep ecology gives priority to the maintenance of nature. And it prefers biocentric equality, diversity, and decentralization. In deep ecology, friends, all other plant species and animal species are as important as human existence in the planet Earth. So it's a type of ecological fundamentalism. Deep ecology is a type of ecological fundamentalism, that nature is more important than man. There is no place for man in the nature if you don't think about nature. It's a deep ecology. That's why I told you it's a type of ecological fundamentalism. This is one view, friends, of green politics, that we have to consider ecology in our life. If you want to live in this world, all your activities, the way in which you build a house, the way in which you use automobiles, the way in which you cook at your kitchen, the way in which you generate energy, everything has to give due importance to ecology. So that's one point, very important point in green politics. A second important point in green politics is the idea of holism, Holism. What is holism? Friends, traditional political ideologies believe that human beings are the masters of natural world. Human beings are the masters of natural world. This is a traditional idea. Therefore, traditional political philosophy, there is no regard for environment or nature. And in traditional political philosophy, nature is regarded as an economic resource. You might remember what John Locke said. when you mix your labor with a thing in the nature, that thing in the nature will become your property. That Locke believes man got a natural right to invade nature. So traditional political philosophies are all against nature. So in his famous book, Turning Point, The Turning Point, Fritjof Capra, a famous writer, Fritjof Capra, a scientist and a philosopher, argued that the scientific worldview of René Descartes, and Isaac Newton has destroyed the nature itself. René Descartes and Sir Isaac Newton has destroyed the nature. And he critiqued the Cartesian and Newtonian worldview as anthropocentric. He criticized the Cartesian means René Descartes. René Descartes' idea is called Cartesian idea. The Cartesian and Newtonian worldview has destroyed the nature itself, because their worldview are anthropocentric. That is, man is superior animal. So everything in the nature are secondary. So the 17th century philosophers portrayed the nature as a machine. The 17th century philosophers like René Descartes and Sir Isaac Newton portrayed the world, the nature as a machine. And this machine can be understood Cartesian and Newtonian paradigms, methods. So you can understand this nature, because nature itself is a motor. So science will enable you to understand nature. And you can understand nature by scientific method. And you can understand the nature by developing sophisticated scientific methods like the one Isaac Newton developed, like the one René Descartes developed. Friends, this idea, according to Fritjof Capra in his book Turning Point, provided the basis for industrial civilization and the development of technology. Capra argues orthodox sciences. By orthodox sciences, Fritjof Capra means Cartesian science and the Newtonian science. Capra argues the orthodox science became the basis of our current day environmental crisis. Friends, today's land pollution or noise pollution, acid rain, climate change, or ozone depletion, or acid rain, or deforestation, flood, landslide. Why all these issues? None of these issues existed before the 19th century. None of these kinds of issues existed in human world before the 19th century. All these issues, like I said, the climate change or greenhouse effects, your emission of chlorofluorocarbon, CFC, emission of chlorofluorocarbon into the atmosphere, and the depletion of ozone layer, the melting of polar ice. Friends, all these problems are because of two very important scientists. Who are they? René Descartes and Sir Isaac Newton. Because their scientific worldview dominated modern science. And they are responsible for all the environmental crisis in the world. The Fritjof Capra argues in his book, The Turning Point. Therefore, we need a new worldview. And that new worldview is holism. Holism, holism. The term holism was coined by Jan Smuts, Jansmuts, Jan Smuts, in the year 1926. And he was 2 times the Prime Minister of South Africa. And he said, you can understand the natural world only by understanding it as a whole, WHOL, whole, not through individual parts. In Cartesian or Newtonian paradigms, worldviews, the nature is divided into parts. And Isaac Newton proposed the famous scientific reductionism. Scientific reductionism. That is, to understand things, you have to reduce everything to the smallest unit, to particles, to atom, to molecules, to chemical compounds. But holism says, to understand a thing, you have to understand thing as a whole, not as a part. So nature is a whole, not a part. So this idea was proposed by Jan Smuts in 1926. He coined the word holism. Fritjof Capra, for example, says the Cartesian Newtonian worldview, the Cartesian and Newtonian worldview, has been abandoned by many contemporary scientists. This worldview, scientific worldview, has been already abandoned. The Cartesian worldview and the Newtonian worldview is already abandoned, Capra says. And Capra himself was a physicist, and he himself rejected this idea. And during the 20th century, a new type of physics developed, and scientists call this new physics. And you may remember, this new physics was developed by Albert Einstein. The new physics was developed in the 20th century by Albert Einstein, who rejected the Cartesian worldview and the Newtonian worldview, whose theory of relativity fundamentally challenged the traditional concepts of time and space. And you remember, Einstein's work was advanced by the quantum physics, Max Planck, and quantum theory. And quantum theory was, developed by physicists like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg. In quantum theory, the physical world is understood not as a collection of individual molecules or atoms or particles or chemical compounds. In quantum theory of Niels Bohr or Werner Heisenberg, physical world is understood as a system, not like Isaac Newton views the nature, not like René Descartes views the nature. You have to view the nature as a system or as a network of systems. So a system view, you have to propose a system view to the nature. And friends, in his famous book, Tao of Physics, Fritjof Capra, I have read that book when I was an MS student. I remember reading Tao of Physics. Fritjof Capra drew our attention to the difference between modern physics and Eastern mysticism. He argued religions such as Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, particularly Zen Buddhism, have preached the unity of all the things in the nature. Man is also a part of the nature. Man is not different from nature. But Western science considered man different from all other things in the nature. So Western science of Newton and Rene Descartes separated man from nature. This has caused all the troubles of modern civilization, particularly environmental crisis of the contemporary world. So all the things alive, the stones you have, the rivers you have, the mountains you have, the water ponds you have, the rocks you have, even the earth itself, everything is Mother Earth. So we are part of that Mother Earth. And friends, referring to this idea, famous writer James Lovelock proposed the Gaia hypothesis. The Gaia hypothesis is a theory. Gaia, Gaia hypothesis. Hypothesis. Gaia hypothesis. Earth is best understood as a living entity. That acts to maintain its own existence. That tries to maintain its own existence. That is Gaia hypothesis by James Lovelock. Earth's biosphere, Earth's atmosphere, Earth's oceans, Earth's soil, precisely they exhibit a self-regulating behavior. But friends, modern science and technology destroyed that self-regulating behavior of Earth. So we have to bring back, that self-regulating behavior of Earth's soil, Earth, oceans, biosphere, atmosphere, etc. And Gaia theory, friends, it developed into an ecological ideology. And it, sent a powerful message to human beings all over the world that you must respect the health of the planet. You must respect the health of the planet. And when you build a house, when you cut a tree, when you spray some pesticides, when you do anything, friends, you have to respect the nature. Sustainable living. This is called holism. And the third point is sustainability. What is sustainability? Friends, green politics argue that Earth should be thought as. Green politics argue that conventional political theory defined Earth as something like a spaceship. That is a closed system. Earth is something like a closed system, and we are all inside it. And we can understand what is surrounding us. And this, spaceship idea of Earth was proposed by Kenneth Boulding. Kenneth Boulding argued that human beings have traditionally acted. Human beings have traditionally or historically acted as though, THOUGH, as though they live in a cowboy economy. Look at the phrases they are using. Cowboy economy, Earth as a spaceship, the spaceship model of Earth. So he said, human beings historically acted as though they live in a cowboy economy. That is, it's an economy with unlimited opportunities. Cowboy economy is an economy in which humans have unlimited economic opportunities. That's why the American West grown up, the Britain grown up. So this spaceship called Earth is a closed system. It's not an open system. Because Earth does not receive any input from outside. Planet Earth does not receive any input from outside. That's, we are part of a galaxy. We are part of a Milky Way, and the Milky Way is part of a universe. This is, contemporary science, astrophysics. But, conventional science think that, planet Earth is itself is a closed system, because we are not receiving any kind of input from, outside existence. All ecosystem on Earth is closed. The ponds you have, forest you have, lakes you have, the seas you have, are closed. But that's a wrong idea, friends, because the ponds, the forests, lakes and seas are all depending upon sun, right? Sun rays. We are depending so much on sun rays. But traditionally our political philosophy, the worldview has been dominated by the idea of a spaceship, that we are closed inside a spaceship and acting here and living here, and we are nowhere connected to any other outside thing. But that's a wrong idea. However, closed systems, however, the closed system you have, when you act like you are in a spaceship, you will show the evidence of entropy. ENTROPY. Look at the words they are using. Entropy. I said spaceship, I said cowboy economy, now I said entropy. So if you live in a closed system, you will show evidences of entropy. Entropy means decay or disintegration. That if you were living in a closed system, Earth would have been already destroyed, because we cannot survive believing that we are in a spaceship, because this spaceship would have already collapsed if your planet Earth was a closed system. So environmentalists is arguing that we are not a closed system. So you are not supposed to invade Mother Earth. You are not supposed to invade nature. You have to respect nature, because our life is also depending upon so many other things in the universe. So Stephen Hawking, for example, said there may be many universe itself. The galaxy you have, the Milky Way you have, which is part of the universe, and we don't know the boundary of the universe. And this boundaryless universe will have so many boundaryless universe. Look upon the wild imagination of Stephen Hawking. So there is no entropy in the world. But our point is that the industrialization, the mass affluence have been made possible. Exploitation of nature. Your industrialization and mass affluence, people with riches, science and technology made possible. Exploitation of nature. So your coal energy, your gas energy, oil reserve, you are exploiting nature, which provided fuel for power stations, factories, motor cars, aeroplanes, and so on. Because you are exploiting resources in the nature. So these fossil fuels, you are exhausting the energy in the nature. Friends, that's why the famous writer E.F. Schumacher said, we have to think about, non-renewable energy sources, which he said in his book, Small is Beautiful. Small is Beautiful. The famous book, Small is Beautiful. E.F. Schumacher. He argued that human beings have made a mistake. You have made a mistake. What is that mistake? You have regarded energy in the nature as an income. You have regarded coal, gas, oil reserves as income, which you have used for power stations, factories, motor cars, and aeroplanes. Friends, that itself is a wrong idea. It was a historic mistake that man committed. You have considered energy in the nature as an income. Thereby, you have started exploiting resources in the nature by considering it as an income. So that's why, friends, in 1968, famous writer Garrett Hardin proposed an environmental model called tragedy of the commons. Look at the phrase he used, the tragedy of the commons. Friends, why are you throwing waste into public places? Because public places belongs to everyone, so that it belongs to no one. So you can throw waste. You will never throw waste into your private property, but you will throw waste into river, into ocean, into atmosphere, sometimes into neighbor's property. It's called tragedy of commons. So the theory that global commons, we are exploiting global commons. What are the global commons? The oceans, the sea, the rivers, the ponds, the air, the atmosphere. These are all commons. It belongs to all of us, so that we are exploiting it. So the global commons are subjected to inevitable degradation because individuals, business, and even nation states place self-interest before collective good. You are throwing waste into ocean. You will never throw waste into your well. Your well in the house, you will never throw, but you will throw waste into pond because it is owned by no one. You will throw waste into river because it is owned by no one. But you will never throw waste into your well. This is called the tragedy of commons. So we have to think about the tragedy of commons. So this is idea, proposed by Garrett Hardin. And friends, by 1970s and 80s, the world began to think about sustainability. By 70s and 80s, the world began to think about sustainability. The idea of sustainability was proposed by Brundtland Report, B-R-U-N-D-T-L-A-N-D, Brundtland Report, B-R-U-N-D-T-L-A-N-D, Brundtland Report, published in the year 1987. The famous definition of sustainable development was proposed by this Brundtland Report, which said, sustainability is the idea that development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Friends, whenever you do something, the best ecological model is that whenever you do something, you give importance not only to your own life, you should give importance to the life of the generations to come. When you do something, when you cut a tree, when you pick some water from a pond, when you invent something, you should also consider not only your needs, but the needs of the generations and generations and generations to come, because they are also, the owners, also have the claim, right to use these resources. So you are not supposed to use it for yourself. You should preserve it for future generations. That's called sustainability model. And this sustainability idea got, attention in the 1980s. And then another principle is environmental ethics. Environmental ethics. That what is environmental ethics? That human species should not make distinction between the present generation and the future generation. What a beautiful idea, friends. Look upon the way in which ideas are being proposed. You have to think not only about your generation, you have to think about the generations to come. Such idea is called futurism. So futurism, you have to care for the future. Your actions of the present should also be the actions for the future. So your actions should be an ecological stewardship. Your actions should be an ecological stewardship. That the actions of the present generation necessarily be linked to the needs of the future generation. That is called ecological stewardship. So this is what may be called environmental ethics. And along with environmental ethics, animal rights also attained importance. And that was proposed by Peter Singer. His book I have told you in the beginning. That you have to also care for the welfare of other animals in the planet. You have to liberate animals. Because in our imagination of invading nature, we never gave respect to other animals who are also the owners of the nature. But we are only exploiting for ourselves, our own self-interest, protecting our own self-interest, fulfilling our own self-interest. You are invading nature. So consider other animal species. Because present humans are considering their species interest as the best interest and separate from the species interest of other animals. This is called speciesism. Human beings are motivated by speciesism. You have to drop that idea in your culture. This is called environmental ethics. And finally, friends, last point of green politics is from having to being. What is from having to being? The German psychoanalyst and social philosopher Erich Fromm, E-R-I-C-H F-R-O-M-M, Erich Fromm, said, we have to make a call for having attitude of mind. We have to think about having the disposition to seek fulfillment in acquisition and control. And you have to change your commitment to having to being. Your commitment from having to being. That means human development is dangerously unbalanced. Human beings and their development is dangerously unbalanced. And we human beings are blessed with massive know-how. We know how things work. And we know how to go behind material wealth. But friends, we possess little of know-how. How things work, we don't know. And humankind has acquired the ability to fulfill its material ambition. Human beings have acquired the ability to fulfill its material ambition. But we don't have the wisdom to know whether your ambitions are sensible or sane. We don't know. We have ambitions, but we don't have the wisdom to judge whether our ambitions are sensible. That's why Schumacher, in his book, Small is Beautiful, famously said, man is now too clever. Man is now too clever to survive without wisdom. What a beautiful sentence. Man is now too clever to survive without wisdom. We became intelligent. The point is, do you have wisdom? Do you have wisdom? So that's why this point that we have to think about from having to being. Friends, that's all about this lecture. Now the floor is open for discussion. ഹെവി ലെക്ചറായി പോയി. ഒന്നും കിട്ടിയില്ല? എല്ലാം കിട്ടിയോ
സർ?
ആ യെസ് പറഞ്ഞോളൂ.
സർ ഇപ്പൊ ലാസ്റ്റ് പറഞ്ഞില്ലേ ഹാവിംഗ് ടു ബി, അതില് മനുഷ്യർ ഒരു ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് ഉണ്ടാവുമ്പോ അതില് പ്രകൃതിനെ കൂടി മീൻസ് ശ്രദ്ധിച്ചിട്ട് വേണം, അതാണ് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്?
അങ്ങനെയല്ല, നമുക്ക് എല്ലാം ഉണ്ട്. നമുക്ക് ചുറ്റുപാടുകളെ മനസ്സിലാക്കാനൊക്കെ ഉള്ള കഴിവുണ്ട്, എല്ലാം ഉണ്ട് നമ്മുടെ കയ്യിൽ, ഇന്റലിജൻസ് ഉണ്ട് നമുക്ക്. പക്ഷെ ആ ഇന്റലിജൻസിൽ വിസ്ഡം ഉണ്ടോ എന്നാണ് ചോദിക്കുന്നത്. വിസ്ഡം അത് എന്തിനു വേണ്ടിയാണ് ഇതൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുന്നത്, ആർക്ക് വേണ്ടിയാണ്, നമ്മൾ എന്തിനാണ് ഇങ്ങനെ വെൽത്ത് അമാസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്? നമുക്ക് ഒരുപാട് മെറ്റീരിയൽ വെൽബീയിങ് ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ട്, നമ്മുടെ ജീവിതം ഒരുപാട് ബെറ്റർ ആയിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമുക്കിപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ ശരീരം അനക്കണ്ട, നമ്മൾ വളരെ സെഡൻറ്ററി ലൈഫാണ് നയിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്, സെഡൻറ്ററി ലൈഫ്. പക്ഷേ ഈ സെഡൻറ്ററി ലൈഫിന്റെ അർത്ഥം എന്താണ്? ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ ജീവിച്ചു പോകുന്നതിന്റെ അർത്ഥം എന്താണെന്നാണ് ചോദിക്കുന്നത് എൻവയോൺമെന്റലിസ്റ്റ്. എന്താണ് ജീവിതം? നമ്മൾ ശരിക്കും അന്വേഷിക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ ജീവിതത്തിന്